Sprout 7. There was always a kind of bewildered, dawning realization that came with first stepping onto a battlefield. The time it took for your brain to catch up with what you were looking at. Battlefields were chaotic at the best of times, and as a rule, it was a growing kind of chaos that spread like an infection. With the scope of parahuman powers and the range of my own, it was possible to turn a corner and pass over the line between a thriving city and a war zone, long before any of it physically came into sight. And when that happened, I had to rely entirely on my swarm to put the pieces together, as vague memories of buildings I'd walked past were replaced with rubble and fire. Even my power didn't fully erase the confusion of that shock. If anything, it might have worsened it, because it gave me so much more of the picture. I just went through that confusion long before I got to the fight, most of the time. But here, now, I needed a moment just to take it all in, because I didn't see places my range fell over exactly, or I didn't see them with human eyes at least, and I didn't just see them. My wandering range wasn't a spotlight in the dark, giving me clear vision beyond my normal sight like conventional clairvoyance might. It was simply and entirely my swarm. As new bugs came into my range, it was like opening new eyes, but each species had adapted for different purposes. Some of their eyes were simple, others compound, and even with the latter, the meaning of compound varied wildly. Some eyes were faceted in the order of the dozens, and served mostly to recognize light changes, while others numbered in the tens of thousands, specialized for hunting prey in midair. When they came under my control, those countless forms of visions overlapped into a hodgepodge collage, wherein part of an object might be a vague blob, and others crystal clear, or visible only in motion, or only in the light or dark. Here, a bee's vision bled into ultraviolet, and what seemed plain to human eyes turned startlingly colorful. There, a mosquito's antenna picked up infrared. My muffs picked up sound ranging into the hundreds of kilohertz, while my flies could sense the taste of meat on the air from miles away. And all that overlapped millions of times, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions, and a picture began to form from the mix. Countless blurred colors and shapes slowly took form and meaning. Countless overlapping ranges of hearing slowly made sense of sound, and the pieces began to come together. The closest thing I could liken it to was a computer screen, only coming on one pixel at a time, but full sensory, and not all the pixels came on in order, or I'd have to move pixels around to light up ones that were dark. Also, it wasn't just a flat image either, but three-dimensional, and oftentimes I saw inside of things. So, maybe not really at all like a computer screen. And then, of course, there was my sense for chakra. My newest sense was sharpest by far through my Kikaichu, and it was normally as multifaceted as my swarm's vision, coming in through countless scents, tastes, and colors. But today, the world was dyed crimson by a source so massive and bright that it was like I was standing beneath a red sun rather than moving in the middle of the night. It was all but overwhelming my sense for it, like I was standing at a hurricane and an ongoing explosion at the same time. So large that every other source of chakra in range seemed like sparks being given off by a raging fire. This was my world as my range reached the field of battle. Half night as seen through close to 1 billion eyes and senses, half searing day. And through both of those worlds, the battle raged. A man grew to the size of a giant and struck the giant fox with a roar that was born half of pain and half of rage. Several dozen men seemed to extend their shadows, passing over my bugs as regions of mobile darkness latched onto the QB's own, before they all screamed as he simply tore free. Ninja exhaled blasts of fire, while others unleashed waves of air and chakra to fan the flames. Massive dogs grew larger and even seemed to combine, lashing out at the QB, while clones were created and used as distractions. Metal weapons were hurled into the air, bombs were set off, The ground was reshaped to try to hamper the fox's movements. And yet, through it all, the beast approached. In many ways, it was like the onset of an Endbringer attack, which was something I was tragically used to. With the bugs that were crawling through the dirt and overshadowed earth and broken buildings, I got a sense for the damage that had been done and began to put together a timeline of what had happened. From the looks of things, the Kyuubi had appeared at the edge of the village opposite the cliffside monument, had devastated the surrounding areas, and now everyone was fighting to try to keep him from getting any deeper inside. I sensed the people fighting the Kyuubi and marked them one by one. A bug on top of their heads, each of their hands and the back of their shoes was enough to start with. Then I marked surfaces, to get a clearer picture of the action, refining my mental image and helping me keep track of the action and make sure I wasn't missing anything. With my Kikaiju, I memorized the taste and feel of each person's chakra. It was hard to get a sense for them at a distance, with the storm of the Kyuubi's chakra around us. But if they were in direct contact with my bugs, that was a different story. And with all that additional information, I verified my initial impression. Because, like in an Endbringer attack, everything was going to shit right from the start. In fact, not only were things going terribly, but it really looked like they were probably going to get worse too. Because having checked and weighed the chakra of the entire defensive line against what we were facing, the Kyuubi had more chakra than all of us combined. Except, no, that was, well, true, but woefully inadequate. At a guess, allowing for anyone outside my range, there were about 2,000 shinobi on the front lines, as part of a greater force of perhaps 7,000 in all, with the rest running interference, creating diversions, erecting defensive fortifications, healing them, moving supplies and attacking the Kyuubi from range. Based on that, I would be surprised if the number of ninja in Konoha exceeded 15,000, a bit over twice of what was gathered here. Though even this was an incredible fighting force, greatly exceeding the turnout of any Endbringer attack I'd ever been a part of. And while it was hard to draw a one-to-one comparison between legions of people with often unique superpowers, they weren't weak by any standard. I didn't see any outlier powers like Foil, Eidolon or Glastigwenyi at a glance. But pound for pound, the army gathered here was probably greater than what the Protectorates could muster even in ideal conditions. And even if they didn't have anyone as durable as Alexandria, or with the potential firepower of, say, Firsay, these shinobi were still all far stronger, faster and more versatile than the norm for parahumans, and it was almost stunning to watch them go all out. But it would have taken at least 10 times as many shinobi to match the Kyuubi's chakra. As in, even if there were 150,000 of us, I didn't think we could match the Kyuubi in raw power. It might even have taken 200,000 or 300,000. It was hard to tell, the difference was so great. And as someone who'd built a career on taking down people with bugs, I knew that size wasn't everything. And numbers, trickery and sheer brutality could make up for a lot, but damn if it wasn't intimidating. Looking at someone who could have wiped us all out with a single attack if he really felt like it. I didn't know exactly how, but just feeling that chakra, there had to be a way. Which was familiar too, reminding me again of the Endbringers, of Scion. Attacks and actions that were not thoughtless exactly, but clearly restrained once you knew what you were looking for. It was obvious that the Kyuubi wasn't really trying, because if he was, we'd all be dead by now. I tried to tell myself that was a good thing, whether it was because this was a game to him or out of sadism or whatever else. So long as he wasn't fighting at his fullest, that gave us that much more of a chance to win. Frankly, even whatever had brought him here like this was to our advantage, simply because it gave us a chance to fight back. Granted, it was like fighting against a natural disaster, but it still gave us the chance. Leviathan was a terrifying physical threat too, but if he really felt like it, he could have just sat under the waves near a coast and thrown tsunamis at his targets. And I wasn't sure what anyone would have done about it. And I couldn't imagine the Kyuubi couldn't do anything but run up to the village gates and start brawling. Still though, even holding back as he clearly was, he was enough of a problem that I wasn't sure how we were actually going to stop him. probably not with brute force, which I hadn't even really been considering it exactly, so much as it had just been a thought in the back of my mind. I developed a habit of keeping possible options in mind, even if just as a last resort. The idea of draining the chakra of everyone in the village into some kind of ultimate attack had seemed like the type of absurd idea that a big enough emergency might necessitate, though I couldn't honestly claim I knew how to actually manage to do that in practice. I'd kept it on the table just in case, figuring I'd hammer out how the hell I'd actually do it and what it would accomplish later. But now, looking at the QB, even if I knew how I could actually do that in the middle of a major battle without anyone noticing or stopping me, I was pretty sure it wouldn't be enough. I discarded the idea, because if it didn't work, it'd just be a waste of everyone's energy. The bright side, I guess, was that I had a whole career filled with absurd last resorts that nonetheless proved woefully inadequate, necessitating resorting to something even more absurd. So the loss didn't sting too much. But what did it leave me? What could I do about all of this? For a moment, I felt like I was 15 again, watching Leviathan rip through my city, while all I could do was watch. It was hard to even make sense of what was happening, much less make a difference in a fight that seemed almost designed to be unwinnable. Hesitant and uncertain, I defaulted to my old standby. With my bugs, I was well equipped to do search and rescue. Or, well, search, I suppose, since I wouldn't be rescuing anyone myself as a baby. But as my range moved through an area, I naturally gained a sense for the wounded from how they attracted members of my swarm. I gathered swarms to signal where people were trapped or hurt, shaping them into downwards pointing arrows. If I could find whoever was in charge of directing people to help the wounded, I could do more. But it'd do for now. As my range settled over the battlefield more fully, covering the places where people had tried to stop the Cubis' advance and failed, I found corpses as well, the nature of my power making it easy to find death and decay. It was a lower priority, but I marked them too, with a skull and crossbones. I also found the corpses of Aburame, still filled with the swarms they'd wielded in life, 7 dead and probably counting. Feeling ice form in the pit of my stomach, I checked each body carefully, looking for biological traces where the presence of their chakra was gone. Not my father or grandfather. I exhaled a breath I wasn't even aware I'd been holding. Looking carefully, I felt my grandfather join the fray, running in from the edge of my range to switch places with someone else. My father, I couldn't find him, but he wasn't one of the corpses on the ground at least. Painful as it was, there was no time to mourn my clansmen's passing though. I collected their Kikaichu and moved on. Through the bugs I'd placed on everyone in range, I watched everyone fighting and listened to their words. I found the people giving orders, and then the people giving orders to them, working my way back along the chain of command in the hopes of finding someone who knew what they were doing. I heard, "Koharu, are the civilians somewhere safe yet?" An elderly man shouted on the front lines, wielding a massive staff. "They're fine, safe!" the old woman shouted back. "Most of them should be in the shelters by now, but they aren't equipped to hold against something like this." "But we are," the man said. "Hold it off until the fourth arrives." Was that the plan? Could the fourth stop this, when the entire rest of the village was struggling to even slow the QB down? As if in response to that thought, the QB began to gather its chakra, gathering it together into an enormous sphere held between its jaws. To my swarm's regular vision, it was a dark smear, but to my chakra sense, it was a blazing star, burning so brightly that it was visible even against the backdrop of the QB's inferno of power. As it prepared to attack, I knew at once that I'd been right. This one attack could wipe us off the map. I gathered my swarm on reflex, but it felt like I was trying to prepare a paper shield to withstand a nuclear bomb. "Please tell me someone here has a way to deal with this," I prayed. The sphere grew and then flew forward, and I saw death rushing towards us. And then it was gone, vanishing into thin air moments before impact. In the distance, I saw a flash through my swarm, bright enough to register across all of my bugs' vision. A moment later, the world shook, caught in the loudest clap of thunder I'd ever heard as the bomb went off in the distance. Even my physical body felt it as things were knocked over in my shelter and in places all across the village, as we narrowly escaped a blast that would have killed us all. "That was a space-time barrier!" someone said in the wake of the explosion. "It's Minato!" Fair enough, I thought, swearing to myself that I would learn space-time ninjutsu even if it killed me, because that was too fucking close. "You're our Eidolon then." I sent a swarm towards the source of chakra I'd felt as the blast was deflected, shifting my range to do so. I found a man standing on the fourth head of the Hokage rock, and though I'd never seen him before, it seemed pretty safe to assume he was the fourth Hokage. If I gave chakra to him... A masked figure suddenly emerged from solid stone behind the fourth and reached for him. At the last second, the fourth seemed to notice, whirling around to strike the man with a knife, but it seemed to pass right through him and the masked man grabbed his hand. "You have to fight me," he said, "and we're done." The man began to twist and spiral around a single point, and the fourth seemed drawn into it like a black hole, before suddenly he was gone. He got away. Talk about fast. I'll have to suck him in faster next time, the moment I touch him, the masked man said, and then he was gone as well with a twist of space. The whole process took maybe 5 seconds. What the fuck? I wondered. I didn't even have time to make sense of that before it was over. Foul play, obviously. But was it someone taking advantage of the attack? Or was that man the cause of the attack? From the sound of things, the fourth had plenty of people who might have wanted to get rid of him, but the timing seemed a bit much for a coincidence. But what was that power? Intangibility? Some kind of black hole technique? And teleportation? And possibly the power to control or redirect a QB? Where'd a guy like this come from? One thing was clear though. If the plan was to wait for the fourth to arrive, someone had just thrown a spanner in the works. At best he'd be delayed. In the worst case he might not show up at all. The QB could blow us all up as the mood took him, and as far as I could tell, the only person who could do anything about it was MIA. I took a moment, searching with my Kakaiju and the rest of my swarm. The fourth wasn't in my range. I had a fraction of them scan the edge of my range though, and I felt... something. I'd memorized the fourth chakra signature, along with that mysterious man's and, well, everyone else's. And I could feel them still, but only dimly. They must have been miles away. Should I go after them? From the looks of things, the fourth might have been our only hope, but... Fuck, I thought, frustrated. I couldn't risk it. Not when both parties were teleporters. My range was moving faster than I could have run in my previous life, but probably not much faster than a car. I couldn't take the risk that they just teleport away again while I was in pursuit. I'd be better off finding someone faster to go after them, or pass on a message somehow. And... I was scared. I'd risked my life for the chance to do something, and I saw now that it was the right choice. The lives of my entire family were hanging by a thread. If the QB shot another blast like that, it'd be the end of us. And if that happened, I wanted to know. To be in a position to say I was sorry for failing, maybe. To be with my family instead of traveling across miles of forest. The fourth is a teleporter too, I justified to myself. The only way he's staying in one place for 10 minutes while the village is being attacked is if he's dead. I'll just have to hope he makes it back in time. But what do I do then? I was already searching for and marking people. During the Leviathan fight, I'd helped keep track of him, but the QB was enormous. There was no fear of losing sight of him. Communication and coordination were two things I considered myself good at, but that was assuming I knew what I was working with, and right now, things were just happening. This was the first time I'd seen most of these people, and the first time I'd seen any ninja fight for real. The same way I could memorize a password being typed into a keypad, the bugs I put on people's hands could tell me what jutsu they were casting, assuming I knew the jutsu in question, which, as a rule, I didn't. I was making progress on that, but those with enough control could exclude certain hand signs. My clan was different since I had thousands of bugs inside their bodies, but for everyone else, I was mostly at the phase where if someone used the same jutsu twice, I could recognize it the second time. It didn't look like the Kyuubi would give me time to learn the abilities of every ninja in Konoha, and come up with a strategy to use them though. So whoever was in charge was probably doing a better job than I could. Besides, even assuming I knew who to talk to and could pass off as someone trustworthy and worth taking orders from while speaking through my swarm, I didn't even know the names of most of our fighting force. What was I going to say? Tell the big man in section D6, a location I made up in my head, to use the jutsu that made him larger again, and then tell the 5'7" individual in section E5 to use that air push again? I'm sure that would go over smoothly with no breaks in the chain of command at all. Fuck! I thought again, fear blending with frustration. Maybe I should gamble on trying to catch up with the fourth after all. I'm used to this here. Then it happened. My grandfather was on the front lines, with a lot of what seemed to be older ninja, who had apparently taken on the role of physically forcing the Kyuubi out of the village as the front line. Surprisingly, instead of using his bugs, he went for an earth jutsu, raising walls, pillars and blockades. He and a giant man I assumed to be from the Akamichi clan seemed to be responsible for keeping the Kyuubi on a certain footing, while the man I assumed to be the third Hokage focused on hammering the fox out of the village. But the Kyuubi roared, and it was like a bomb going off, blasting away barriers, buildings and people alike. My grandfather raised walls of earth as fast as he could, trying to blunt the scream before it reached the rest of the front line, and was only marginally successful. I recognized the damage from fights with Behemoth, the wounds that kind of sound could inflict. His left eardrum burst and organs ruptured, and my grandfather reeled, bleeding from his mouth, nose and eyes. Shiro! The man that must have been the third Hokage shouted, and it wasn't out of concern. He ran past my grandfather, making seals. Already hurt badly enough that he was bleeding into his own bug tunnels, my grandfather followed, making seals of his own, and the ground beneath the Kyuubi softened into mud, keeping his claws from getting a grip, and the older man charged, my grandfather leading the way. The Kyuubi swung its tail, and the Akamichi pushed himself into the way, something like glowing butterfly wings sprouting from his back. Giant, and yet somehow emaciated, limbs spinning with every moment that passed. He stopped to swing, but I knew just from the echoing crack of giant bones that he was probably a dead man, if not right now, then soon. The Kyuubi began to swipe with his claws next, and my grandfather stopped and fell to his knees, touching the ground. Dozens of pillars of earth erupted all around him, pushing against the Kyuubi at an angle as if he could push the giant fox out of the village. But the Kyuubi just braced himself for a moment and the pillars broke against his hide, shrugged off like rain. The other shinobi didn't hesitate though, jumping up into the pillars and running along them at full speed towards the fox, while my grandfather remained at the bottom, right as the Kyuubi's claws ripped through the base of all the pillars at once with an echoing crash. My heart froze again, and then my swarm was in motion. Get your fucking head in the game, I told myself. It doesn't matter if you're good enough. Do something, weaken him, buy time, try to keep people alive. Anything is better than doing nothing. I surveyed the area, trying to ignore the part of myself that was screaming. My grandfather was alive. His heart was beating, however faintly, and that's what mattered, not the arm and leg that were disconnected. I put my feelings, my doubts, and my welling fears in a box and threw away the key. What did any of that matter when I could be dead 5 minutes from now? If I had time to worry about that, I had time to try to find my way out of this situation. If the fourth showed up, good. Otherwise, we need to drive this thing off ourselves. I gathered my silk, my biting and stinging bugs, everything. Could I bind something like this? I'd be shocked if I could. I had a lot of silk prepared over the last few months, but I don't know if I had this much. What would I even anchor the threads to? Trees? Buildings? He just ripped both of those out of the ground. It didn't matter. I'd try anyway. Same with poison. I was doubtful any of the bugs I had access to would even slow this thing down, but I'd rather do it than not. But, odds are, there was only one thing I could do here that would change anything. I replaced my grandfather's Kikaichu with some of our fallen clansmen, feeding him the chakra they had left. It wasn't much, wasn't a match for real medical ninjutsu, but it was better than nothing. I left some behind to continue feeding him chakra, but took the rest of his swarm with me, adding them to those of our fallen clansmen, and I set them on the fox. I probably couldn't do any significant damage to something this size with my swarm, but surely I could absorb its chakra. Except the bugs that absorbed that chakra immediately began to die. No, die wasn't a strong enough word. They began to melt, inside and out, as if they were drowning in acid, their bodies quickly turning misshapen and then began to liquefy, and then starting to boil. So caustic was the Kyuubi's chakra. I guess that was why my grandfather had chosen to use Earth Jutsu instead of the clan's techniques. I didn't have that option. I just have to make it work. But these were my clansmen's bugs. I had to at least spend their lives carefully. Gathering more of my swarm, I had the first wave of Kikaichu transfer half their poisonous chakra to another bug, and had each of them split it in half again and again, all the while imagining I was breaking down sugars in a bee's stomach, absently remembering some saying about the difference between medicine and poison being the dosage. Except, maybe that didn't apply to super acid chakra, because it didn't change anything. With one bug, it wasn't enough. With 10 bugs, it still wasn't enough. Passed between 10 hands, it melted every one of them. And even when split between 100, I could feel it burning within them. I'd have to split each mouthful of chakra 1,000 ways to make it survivable. And I didn't have enough time to do that right now. Especially since the Kikaichu were the ones taking the worst of the damage. I wouldn't get anywhere taking sips of the Kyuubi's chakra and passing them around. Fine, I thought. If dividing the chakra doesn't work, what if I gather more of it in one place? So, I went the other way instead. My Kikaichu were precious but limited. I only had about 100,000 usable Kikaichu, since many had perished with their owners. But I had countless other bugs, having gathered close to 1 billion as I pushed my range through the city, although most of them would have been useless even if I wasn't fighting a giant acidic fox monster. And so I was more than happy to sacrifice them if it'd make a difference, on an altar if needed. I gathered bugs around one of my dying Kikaichu, its body going haywire as its exoskeleton began to slouch off, and one by one I had them transfer their chakra into it. All of their chakra, down to the very last drop until they dropped dead in its place. All to get a twitch of life out of the Kikaichu. When one wasn't enough, I sacrificed 2, then 10, then 100, then 1,000, because I had the bugs for it. At least for now. A twitch became a squirm as nerves fired, then turned into a shudder, then the Kikaichu molted, a new skeleton appearing beneath the melted old one. The Kyuubi's chakra continued to do damage, but I continued to heal the Kikaichu through it, leaving behind a carpet of sacrifices in the process. In exchange for thousands of bug lives, the destructiveness of the chakra began to slowly abate as the bugs shed their skin again and again, molting and warping and changing each time. I repeated the process elsewhere, gathering up more chakra with my swarm and preserving the Kikaichu at the center of it far beyond the point of death. I was willing to bet most people probably had at least a little trouble when it came to sacrificial techniques like this, but I found it came to me almost depressingly easy. Especially compared to yin and yang chakra. I had been ready and willing to sacrifice the lives of millions of bugs to learn this technique, but I got the hang of it after around a dozen. Was I just naturally suited for self-sacrifice or sacrificing others? I wasn't sure I liked the implications of that, so I decided to just attribute it to the countless hours of chakra transfer practice I had. I decided to name the technique the Makai Tensei, after a play I'd heard about in passing about an evil sorcerer bringing back the dead to serve them. Though apparently it wasn't a very popular play in Konoha, because there were rumors that the evil sorcerer was based on the second Hokage, who could apparently also bring back the fucking dead, because ninjas could do anything. I wouldn't have hated it if he were here right now. Next, I tried to channel the life energy of 100,000 bugs into my grandfather next, draining them dry to try to heal him. But as far as I could tell, it didn't do anything. Either the scales involved were too different, or there was some kind of compatibility issue between humans and bugs. If I was there, I probably could have sacrificed myself, but I wasn't. Damn it. Focus, I told myself as another Kikaichi made off with a mouthful of the Kyuubi's chakra, flesh liquefying all the while, and then regrowing as other bugs clustered around it. I had my Kikaichi approach the Kyuubi in waves, making off with more and more of its chakra, until all of my Kikaichi were bloated with the beast's fell energy. I wasn't sure the Kyuubi even noticed. I drained 100 times more chakra than I'd ever handled before, enough to fuel the strongest shinobi in the village a dozen times over, and I wasn't sure the Kyuubi even noticed the loss, because it was like I was trying to empty the ocean with a cup. I'd filled my Kikaichi almost to the point of overflowing, and it was like I'd done nothing at all. It's not enough to just take it, I thought. I have to do something with it too. But what and how? The Kikaichi could hold on to that chakra, at least temporarily, but it was too much for them to manipulate. If anything, it was twisting them instead, each time I revived them. Too much for them, I thought. I knew why my grandfather and the older ninja stood on the front lines, why the third had stepped over my grandfather without a moment of hesitation once he was hurt too bad to keep fighting, and why my grandfather had allowed it. They were all ready to sacrifice themselves and watch each other die if it would protect the village, their children, and their children's children. They were willing to go that far to protect the people they cared about. So was I. I had my Kikaichi fly to the edge of my range, and the moment they made contact with it, it was like they'd run into a bug zapper. They died, killed in an instant by the amount of chakra transferred. But I didn't let them stay dead for long. I gathered more bugs and sacrificed them to preserve my more precious insects. At the same time, my entire range lit up, literally. The hexagons flickered to life in midair, a massive dome flashing gold for just a moment around the entire battlefield, before swiftly being stained red. That illumination spread down the path to me and surrounded me in a small bubble of hexagons as well, and even so far away, my Hoka were dyed crimson as the Kyuubi's chakra poured down the connection. It filled my honeycomb cells to bursting, until soon the only gold left seemed to be in the cracks formed by the walls of each cell. And then, of course, it reached me. It felt like pouring acid into my veins. Not quite as bad as Bakuda's pain bomb, but it felt like getting my arm crushed and burnt off all over again, or like getting cut in half. When I opened my eyes, I saw red chakra surrounding me, filling the inside of my sphere, and my skin began to peel off. I bled into the air and the chakra around me, feeling like I was on fire as it was dyed a darker and darker red. But the chakra was blended with mine now, through my Kikaichi, my Higanbana, and my Hoka. And so for a tenuous moment, it didn't seem to be sure if it was trying to heal me or kill me. And you know what? I'll take it. I had the bugs I'd left inside me help keep it away from my vitals while I tried to mold it as quickly as I possibly could, before expelling it from every Tenketsu back into my Hoka. That hurt too, barely enough to register despite everything else. I'd never pushed my chakra network this hard or this fast, and even scattered across 361 points, it was barely enough. I was straining each and every one to the limit of what his body could handle. And I didn't care. My brain felt like it was burning, and I didn't care. Just like my training, I thought. I had billions of buck hours in exchanging chakra, and this was just that on a larger scale, or so I told myself. I molded it, changing it ever so slightly, and stored it back in my honeycombs. So stored, it flowed through new channels I made, and on the other end, I had more Kekaichu collected, and then, once they had it, they distributed it. I guided it first from the edge of my range to my grandfather's motionless body, because I knew his chakra the best, and it lit up around him, conducting along the silk I'd woven for him. The crude mask I'd given him looked like it was melting, deforming into strange shapes as the chakra flowed through it. But my grandfather's body wasn't hurt. Instead, it began to heal him, if slowly. It was a familiar concept in a way. Tuning frequencies to make something deadly harmless. There was a frequency where, if the signals matched and the pieces fit together, the Kyuubi's chakra wouldn't harm someone, at least not in small quantities. If I tuned it to mine, I could hold it mostly okay. It started being painful and dangerous because there was too much of it, rather than because it was caustic at least. But if I wanted to give that chakra to someone else, I had to shape it a second time, which hurt. Then, my bugs sacrificed their lives to transfer that chakra, completing the fit in exchange for their deaths, and others resurrected them. With my hexagons, with shape transformation, I could move the chakra to and fro, guiding it closer to someone. Good enough, I thought. It was working. I called about half the swarm back to me, to help with my side of the transfer, and set the other half back on the Kyuubi, stealing more of its chakra. The fox was reacting now, but sluggishly, like he was drunk or not. I couldn't find the words. It didn't matter. People were screaming. I could hear them, but not through my bugs. I couldn't make sense of that either, so I didn't try. It didn't matter either. When I opened my eyes, all I could see was red. I lifted my hands and my fingers were too long and too thin at the same time. I couldn't understand that either. My mother tried to hold on to me, grab me, clawing at the barrier around me with her fingers. She was saying something, but I couldn't hear her. I had to stop her, I thought. I couldn't let... She'd burn her hands off trying to touch me now. Where before I'd made a third layer of my Hoka to transfer chakra on the inside of my range, now I made a fourth on the outside, using as much of my chakra as I could to turn it gold. Solid but not hot. And right now I had chakra to spare, so much so that I was literally heavy with it. I wasn't just burning, I was sinking into the floor. My body started to bleed under the weight of my own chakra. The third next. My bugs collected it, my Hoka contained it, me to mold it, and then using the reserves to distribute it. 6 degrees of separation away, it was safe enough for others. I had my Kekaichu transfer it to the third next, and red energy lit up around him too. Immediately he noticed the bug. His mouth started moving and I had to focus to hear him. Focus harder than I'd had to since somewhere or other. Shiro, are you the one doing this? The third asked, catching his breath during the break in the fighting. Shiro, my grandfather's name. I don't remember. I made myself speak through my remaining bugs anyway.
For now,
I said, speaking through my swarm. My swarm voice was vague enough that it could have been anyone, but I had leaned towards a masculine voice. Probably. It didn't sound like me, at least, but my ears were playing tricks on me. I could still hear screaming, even though my barrier had cut off the sound around me. How long can you keep this up? He asked, face resolute as he wiped the sweat from it.
until I die.
I said honestly, and the third nodded like that was a natural answer to give. Kohaku! Get a medic! Highest priority! He shouted. Keep it up, Shiru! Minato will be here soon! There was something right. I had to.
Someone?
I began and had to pause. The thought was there, but I had to force them to connect.
Someone attacked the fourth. Don't know who. A masked man. Teleporter who could walk through walls. Both disappeared.
The third's face somehow both fell and went cold. He looked over his shoulder towards the big rock, as if he'd seen something there, but there was nothing. He sucked in a breath. "Where?" he asked. It took me a moment to understand the question, but I made a bug arrow, pointed. The world was getting darker. Things got to the point where I had to use bugs I left to keep an eye on things as sacrifices instead, and when I did, those places went dark to me. I sacrificed the least important places first, as I ferried chakra to more and more of the defending force, but weirdly enough, other places began to go black too. 7,000 shinobi fighting, but 2,000 on the front line? At the rate I was going, that was 150 trips from Agakaichu? I was getting better at it though, more used to this. Might take less. Don't keep track, just keep working. I fed chakra to the front line and the dangerously wounded first, hoping it would be enough. I could feel my grandfather slowly healing, and I hoped that was enough too. As for the ones fighting, they held the line. The first made a hand seal and created 4 clones, and they each were tangible. They used 5 jutsus, 1 for each element, responding to something the QB did. I had bugs on him, but hadn't noticed him moving. I didn't have bugs on the third's clones, but I did notice them moving. Our chakra were mixed, connected, like I was connected to my bugs. I felt myself connect to others, to everyone. The swarm I called home reached me at last, and injected chakra into my heart. I felt it stutter and then start to pound, and I gasped, but it was like I was underwater. I inhaled what tasted like burning blood and coughed, choking, and then the inside of my barrier was filled with bugs, drawing in my chakra so I could breathe. I bled out more and they ate that too. I was in the center of a crawling, living cocoon. What was I doing? Attacking the QB, draining his chakra, feeding it to others. My bugs were different now, more vicious. They bit the QB, eating its chakra meat. They died, they lived. I lived too. I used my Kakaichi for that and my grandfather's swarm on the far end of the process, transferring the safe chakra to others. There wasn't a reason for it, really, except that I didn't want my grandfather to wake up and find his swarm gone, maybe.
I won't be able to keep this up much longer,
I said. I had an off-kilter moment where I wasn't sure if I was speaking from my swarm or my mouth. I'm sorry. Shiro, give your chakra to the medics! Not the first. The woman? Koharu? Where was the third? The world was almost pitch black to me now, nearly empty. My swarm was tiny, barely enough to mark everyone. The cocoon around me was solid now. The flesh of dead bugs melted together with silk and wax. Only my Kakaichi remained. The medics. The ones healing my grandfather. Right. I drew the bugs I had left from the people further away from the fight. I could feel them now, even without the bugs. I told myself once that I wouldn't make anyone else do something I wasn't willing to do myself. And I meant it. If I was the only one who could do this, then I would. If it kept my family in this life safe, I'd do anything. I didn't want to fail them all again. I didn't want to regret what I hadn't done again. I'd save as many people as I could. I wouldn't lose this time. Tara, please stop! Again, that sound came, as if from a distance. Oh, huh. It had been so long, I wasn't used to hearing a sound solely with my ears. We've gotten it out of the village! Keep up the pressure! I felt an army of red lights fighting against the sun. Then came a brighter glow. Ugh, that attack again? The remainder of my swarm gathered, feeding on a chakra as dense as lead, trying to reduce the brightness by even just a shade. It felt like swallowing liquid iron, for them and for me. But the army kept up the attack. I felt someone I'd been looking for appear, disappear, and reappear again, but thought nothing of it. Please! Please, someone help my baby! Miss, please calm down, I'm not fine! Just help my baby! The red sun vanished and my world went dark. Or maybe I blacked out? It didn't feel like I had, but it was funny. Maybe it was because it was fresh on my mind, but for a while, I imagined myself on the shore of a river, red spider lilies swaying on the other side. Then, something hammered the insides of my chest so hard that for a moment, I thought that some kind of monster was going to burst out of it. I put a hand to my chest and felt nothing, until that painful hammering came again, with an echoing crack along the edges of my hearing. I collapsed on the riverside, caught between silence and thunder, and then the world went dark for real. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not.